Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Dr. John Robson. John, talking still focused on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which really has dominated geopolitical discussions this year. We will get to China in a second, but really wanted to get a sense of you seeing, you mentioned how the West kind of coalesced and was working together. Obviously provided a lot of military equipment as well as intelligence for the Ukrainians. Can that continue, or are we living on borrowed time on that front?
Some of us certainly are. I mean, again, when the Canadian military decides to pass on its equipment to another country, you know that that other country is either in big trouble or else somewhat deluded. We are essentially ourselves disarmed. And again, another of these very fatuous kind of policy courses that's been pursued by parties, frankly, of all stripes. It's not a matter of the current incumbents. The United States obviously is in a better position to supply Ukraine, though we now hear that apparently it was sea dues that they've been using in part to really constrain the Russian Black Sea Fleet. But you know, one of the things about even modern warfare is very ammunition intensive.
Hmm.
That these weapons work wonderfully, but there you need a lot of them, and Canada, of course, doesn't have that. And so I think we've been left again in a position where we strut about the world stage, thinking the world needs more Canada, and the truth is that Canada needs more military. So we're in a rough way, but some other NATO countries, and again, it's almost always it's Uncle Sam who's really doing the heavy lifting. Everybody likes to complain about the United States, but you know they do.
Will that
They
continue
fight.
after the midterms? There's some rumblings on both the left and the right in America that there will be no more blank check, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean that sort of talk, I guess, sounds good at election time. But after the humiliating retreat from Afghanistan, which does, of course, help illustrate the limits of American power, so prudence is not a bad thing. But the idea, okay, we abandoned Afghanistan, let's abandon Ukraine and see how the world looks at our
Yeah.
threats from then on. I hope that cooler heads will prevail. Though again, increasingly, I must say, I look at the modern world and I wonder where all the adults have gone. You always like to think that politicians may say dumb stuff in public, but in private, they're listening to somebody who's a bit less goofy. But as we've seen with the inquiry into the invocation of the Emergencies Act here in Canada, the people who were meant to be in charge really were behaving like spoiled children. And so, you know, you're just hoping somehow the American system and American culture has a certain amount of strategic depth despite everything. But it's amazing how frivolously, and of course, democracies behaved frivolously prior to World War II as well, and even World War One. So you might think, okay, we've seen this movie before. We get our act together when the time comes. But you know, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Franklin Roosevelt asked in genuine bewilderment, he said, "What kind of people do they think we are?" And I am not convinced that we are quite the same kind of people,
Hmm.
with the same kind of understanding when push comes to shove, that you put away childish things and act like adults. I'm hoping so. And again, the Ukrainian resistance has been so inspiring. It's hard to believe that people would not feel, well, if they can do that, we really better do what we can do.
Yes, no, it has been inspiring, and of course, President Zelensky has done an admirable job rallying not only his people but the world as well. One does not want to see him fail, that's for sure. Kind of funny. I mean, we were talking about the Russian military, and now they're deploying Iranian drones because their own ordnance really didn't have much of an effect. Really interesting to see how warfare is changing before our eyes.
It is interesting, and it's interesting to see the ways in which it's not. To see, you know, what we're seeing in Ukraine is an artillery war.
Right.
Well, that's what we saw in both world wars, though people tend not to realize it. The artillery's gotten better, but and I just saw an article today about, oh, I guess the flying tanks don't work, right? That the ground attack aircraft weren't so impressive. And in a way, the flying tanks didn't work in Vietnam either, and I suppose they didn't work in Afghanistan. That in a strange way, it's a Back to the Future war. Even and there was this article I mentioned about the Sea-Doos talking about, oh, the problem for warships today is going to be these swarms of small mobile craft. And people may not know, if you ever look at warships and you find out that the feeblest thing on on the water is called a destroyer. And you're thinking, why is that one the destroyer? And the answer is that when the battleship ruled the waves, there was a fear that these small mobile German E-boats, or the American PT boats, would turn out to be able to dance in, blast them, and zoom back out. And destroyers were E-boat destroyers.
Mm.
So in a strange way, we're seeing that warfare has changed less than we thought. Although I see this, that the Chinese now have a headless robot dog with a machine gun. So everybody who thinks dancing robots are cute better reconsider that one, because
Yes,
there's a kind of warfare that will be even worse than the 20th century kind.
indeed. A very good point. And we are going to get to China, but we're going to do that after this next break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.